A reckoning, and a painful one at that. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. Gets caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, and a touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue. Merry Christmas. I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's edition of Michigan Podcast. And wow, I don't think too many people, whether they be maize and blue, scarlet and gray, or any point in between, thought we were going to see what we saw on Saturday. Not Ohio State winning, but the magnitude and scope of the dominance. This was a whooping. This was getting your manhood taken from you. As we watched key players hobbling off the field, it was a beatdown and a beating. And that third quarter might be the worst, most embarrassing and humiliating quarter I've ever experienced in my 35 years as a Michigan fan. It was so bad. I just tapped out, didn't watch the fourth quarter, took the son to see Creed 2, which, by the way, was enjoyable. And when I asked him if he wanted to go to the movie with his old man, he looked at me and said, I don't know, are we going to see a grown man actually win something? Yikes. See, he's going on 12. This isn't a rivalry to him. It's a perennial beatdown. And when you have a reckoning like that, I think you need to take stock. And we're going to do that here to open up this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. And first, though, I think we've got to put some things in perspective, okay? And we're going to start off with that. Michigan is one of just 8 schools to win at least 8 games 4 years in a row. All right? I mean, under Harbaugh, Michigan is currently averaging 9.5 wins per year, is currently ranked in the top 10. In fact, we're the only school ranked in the top 10 in football and men's basketball right now. And we're headed to a New Year's Six Bowl for the second time in 4 years. If Michigan wins that bowl game, it will be only the 5th 11-win season in the history of the winningest program of all time. Michigan could, depending on how the bowl slotting works itself out, could win only its second Rose Bowl in 25 years. It could have its highest finish in the final polls in the 21st century. We haven't finished in the top 5 since 1999. In 13 seasons, Lloyd Carr won 2 undisputed Big Ten titles, meaning unshared, one national title, but lost 3 or more games 10 times. Harbaugh could still equal, if not surpass that, if he sticks around that long. Oh, by the way, Lloyd Carr, yeah, he's in the College Football Hall of Fame. There's no doubt that Harbaugh has done a very good job here. That's an important point to keep things in perspective as we discuss what stands between very good and elite. Now here's why I gave you this lengthy disclaimer. Because I see this both as a Michigan podcast guy and also in my day job, that adulting distinctions and perspective are difficult for too many of us today. See, too many of us today are incapable of not Jim Harbaugh tiptoes between the raindrops or fire everyone. I wonder how many of us raise our children like this, well, my kid disappointed me, talked back to me, got a bad grade, lied to me, I don't love them anymore. Of course you don't do that, all right? So I don't understand if we can do this with the things that are the closest to us, that can hurt us the most, the people we love. Why is it difficult to do with our political party, our favorite team, our favorite coach, player? So I just thought we needed that perspective. In the macro, this program is way better off than it was 12 months ago when we were launching this for the first time, let alone where it's been the last 10 years. We needed to determine and make sure we reminded everybody of that. However, even though the program is much better off, it is still not gone to where we want it to go. And there are 3 obstacles in our way. We're going to address those right now. Because here's the first one, Urban Meyer. I mean, I know we live in an era where folks will call a sports show when their team, has turnovers, and they'll say, well, if we wouldn't have fumbled the ball 3 times, we might have won. You're right, man, because your guy was just, happy assing it down the field and said, oh, what are those? Drops the ball on his own. Never happened. No, he didn't fumble. It was a turnover. Okay. That's why the stat is turnover margin, not fumble margin. The other team hits you and cause something to happen. We live in this culture now where A, we're all victims, or B, we can't ever admit if someone is better than us. Urban Meyer is a top 5-10 coach all time. I could make the and we're going to set aside, I know what kind of human being he is. I grew up in a home with domestic violence. I understand it. But I had that conversation in July and August. Right now we're just talking football, not humanities. Okay? I can make a case on his resume. He's the greatest coach that's ever been in this league. He is certainly in the top 5 or 10 all time in college football. And, it's tough to beat him. Real hard. And if you look at the 4 years that Jim has faced him, and he's the only coach ever to go 0-4 against Jim, or 0-4 against Ohio State at Michigan, they've all looked different. Have you noticed that? The first year, it's Ezekiel Elliott running wild. The second year, it's they got a bunch of breaks and then beat us in double overtime in a grinded out game. The third year, they bring a backup quarterback off the bench and have to figure out a way to beat us on the road. The fourth year, they're doing an air assault attack, like it's, Houston and the run and shoot with, David Klingler. Notice it's looked different every year. Yeah, that happens when you are an elite all-time football coach. When you follow the New England Patriots, they beat teams one week to the next, totally different from what they did the week before. Why? Because all they want to do is win the game. See, Urban Meyer just wants to win the game. And he's fine winning it in triple overtime. He's fine winning it, 62-39. As long as I win, if I need to run the ball 50 times, cool. If I need to throw it 50 times, cool. He just wants to win. And this gets to our second obstacle. See, our coach, I don't believe, just wants to win. I think, when you look at our game plan and our game flow stubbornness, I think Jim Harbaugh is highly competitive. Maybe the most competitive person that's ever coached in Michigan. But he's just as competitive about how the win looks than whether we win. And see, that's the difference if you go back to the NFL. That's the difference between an Andy Reid, a Marty Schottenheimer, and a Bill Belichick. Andy Reid and Marty Schottenheimer won a ton of games. Now, maybe Andy Reid will break the paradigm this year because, he's kind of abandoned his old way of doing things and went and got himself a Pat Mahomes, and now they're chucking and ducking, baby. So, he figured out, I'm not going to beat Bill Belichick doing what I've always done. He always beats me. I always lose in January. He figured that out. Marty Schottenheimer never did. So Marty Schottenheimer went 11-5, 12-4, 13-3 a lot. And then was one and done in the playoffs a lot. because those are great coaches, better than 85% of their peers. But they want to win in this box. They want the game and they feel as if they're going to win, the game has to look like this. The really elite coaches, the all-timers. What was the great line Keith Jackson once had about the late, great Bear Bryant? He'd take his and beat yours with his, and take yours and beat his with yours. Didn't matter to him. So Nick Saban would prefer to run a 3-4, had to switch to a 4-3. He'd like to do a grind it out. Now they're an air raid. He doesn't get, and if anybody doesn't have to change, it's Saban. He gets the best damn players every year. But see, Saban, as much as he loves winning in the box, you know what he loves even more than winning in the box? Winning. In the box, out of the box, in a rectangle, hexagon, octagon, winning. See, I think our coach has to win in a box. And he's got to break free of this mindset. Now, he started to do it a little bit this year. He did modernize the scheme, but look what happened on Saturday. We never attacked the perimeter of their defense. Go look at a couple of nice long runs Karan Higdon had. I shouldn't say never, rarely. The couple of nice long runs Karan Higdon had were to the outside. Ohio State in this game decided, you know what, our linebackers cannot flow, so we're not going to ask them to anymore. We're just going to bring them downhill and dare Michigan to beat us on the perimeter. And Michigan decided they weren't going to do that. We're sitting here down by 3 touchdowns, and we're still running deep drop, long progression, play action passes, and we're huddling. Why? Why? I mean, Lloyd Carr could get stubborn too, but when he wanted to win that 2000 Orange Bowl, you know what he looked at Tom Brady and said? Dude, we ain't running against these guys. Just throw it in every down. Just get the win. We need Jim to do that. You know, what's the point of going out? Tell me what team in college football, line up Tariq Black, Nico Collins, and Donovan Peoples-Jones. And tell me what team in college football has 3 receivers who look as pretty as those guys in a uniform. How about we put them out there on the field? We got this gunslinger quarterback, you know, that was leading the SEC in passing yards, and we're down by a couple scores. I don't know. You know, I'm just going to throw this out there. Let's see what he can do. Throw into these guys that look like they're pros right now. But we didn't do that. We stuck to our game plan. We played this game like we played Wisconsin. And again, because it's got to be in his box. It needs to be in Jimmy's box. Inside this box, Jimmy is as good a coach as there is in college football. We get outside the box, reach the point of diminishing returns. And so this is where, you know, John Beilein was like that when he came here. John Beilein was an in-the-box coach. He had a certain system. We were going to run that system. And then he realized, snap, man, Michigan State's getting better players than me. I'm not winning this league if I stay in this box. I'll win a lot of games, but I'm not winning championships. Went out and recruited this point guard, Trey Burke, and he's like, you know, I'm kind of stifling him, putting him in my box. I need to say, dude, no one can guard you, so I'm going to let you just, you know, we're going to run some, some pick and pop. We're going to run some ball screen, some 1-4, because I'm pretty confident you're going to get me a better look each possession than I'm going to get me a better look if I overcoach you. I'm going to let you do what you do best. And it worked. And then he decided, you know what, man, I got to play a different kind of defense. John Beilein came to Michigan with a successful system in the box too, and then realized if he ultimately wanted to go where he needed and wanted to go, he was going to have to evolve. And now it is Jim's turn. He has to evolve. But he's not the only one. And that brings me to obstacle 3. And this one has ruffled a lot of feathers this week when I've talked about it on Twitter. We have an unrealistic defensive scheme, and it is exploited by teams with elite skill talent. The 2 teams we need to beat on an annual basis to get to where we want to go are Penn State and Ohio State. In the last 2 years, against Don Brown's defense, they have gotten their record yardage against Michigan. Ohio State just not only got its record yardage against Michigan, but also just scored the most points ever scored against Michigan ever in a regulation game. And you know why they did it? Because the Ohio State coaches put their players in the best possible position to succeed, and the Michigan coaches also put Ohio State's players in the best possible position to succeed. You are not going to play man-to-man coverage against the top 5% of teams in college football every down. You cannot do it, or even on the majority of downs. Because the reason they're that elite is they've got elite players. And I don't care what Pro Football Focus says David Long and Lavert Hill's efficiency ratings are. You only have to get beat, even if you win the matchup 6 out of 10 times. When you're given all of that open space and all of that open field for those guys to defend, they win 3 or 4 out of 10. Those are big plays, and they beat you right there. It's an unrealistic system. It dominates teams we can overwhelm. But when we go up against teams that can hold their water at the point of attack and give their quarterback that extra half a second to throw, that, Rutgers and SMU and Nebraska's offensive line could not, there are wide open passing lanes downfield to throw it to. No college team, hell, no NFL team has 4 guys that can cover in space man-to-man, let alone 2 or 3. It's an unrealistic system. It's a video game system. It's the system you run when you're playing your little brother in Madden and you go 0 blitz and he doesn't have the hand-eye coordination you do and you sack his quarterback all the time. And then you play somebody your own age whose motor function is at your level and suddenly, he gets rid of the ball faster than your 9-year-old brother does. Dwayne Haskins is going to read a defense and get rid of the ball faster than, the quarterback at Michigan State will. Like we saw last year, Trace McSorley, same thing, okay? So again, right now we're a football program that if we want to win 9 or 10 games every year with the way we're recruiting, we will. We're kind of like what LSU was with Les Miles. Have you ever wondered what would have happened if Les Miles had gone to Michigan? It kind of looked like this. We would overwhelm the teams that we recruit better than, which is 85% of them. And then we played the 1 or 2 teams recruiting at or above our level, we would get exposed. And that's exactly the reckoning that happened on Saturday. And now we find out whether the guys that get paid the big money, whether they're able or willing to fix it. Wanted to take a couple of seconds here on Michigan Podcast and say thank you. We are approaching 100 supporters on our Patreon page that has seen some good, steady growth this football season. And that really helps us to have the resources we need to produce this episode for you each and every week here on YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, etc. And so many of you that are watching us right now are kind to put in the $5 a month that we ask you for if you like what we do here. And we just wanted to take a moment and say thank you and remind you that if you're not yet a Patreon supporter of Michigan Podcast, here's just a look as Aaron scrolls up and down the page. These are all content items that we give exclusively to our supporters. And we do this, that's the stuff we do during the year. By the way, my college football picks this year against the spread are well over 20 games over 500 against the number this year. And then we do a lot of neat little features in the off season. We'll keep this up during basketball as well. One of our best viewers sent me a note the other day, said, man, I'm hearing from so many people that want to make sure you guys are to keep doing this during basketball season. We did last year. We're going to do that this year too. So we just wanted to say thank you to all of you supporting us at patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. And if you wish to support us as well, we want to say thank you in advance and go blue. Well, you've heard my opinion. Now let's find out what my partner at Wolverine Digest, Michael Spath from WTKA Ann Arbor, what he thinks, because he's on the ground there. Ground zero for Michigan Nation. It's good to talk to you, Michael. Merry Christmas. How are you, brother?
I'm great. It feels a little bit like ground zero this week after that, that blowout loss. I was going to say humiliating loss that it was, that embarrassing loss, that deflating loss, that surprising loss, that shocking, stunning, whatever you want to describe it as, that's what that loss was on Saturday.
So give us the mood of the local fan base there. I'm the most interested. I've worked in national media for a long time, and here's what I've learned. You're going to get a more accurate portrayal of what a fan base thinks the closer you get to where the team actually is. And so, I feel one way about it and think one way about it as a Michigan fan that lives in Iowa, but you're right there. You're there at the home base in Ann Arbor. So what's been the mood like with your listeners for the last couple of days, brother?
Well, for the listeners, it's been an extreme frustration, I think, that Michigan, in the biggest game of the year, another great opportunity to win a Big Ten title, to vanquish the Buckeyes, to go to a college football playoff, squandered another opportunity. I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat that. There's been a little bit of like a pushback, right? So this is what happens is you have a very disappointing defeat. And what you get is the immediate aftermath for 24 hours is all this expressed angst and frustration and just woe is us and when is this going to change and the pointing the blame and the finger at Don Brown and at Jim Harbaugh. And then what you end up getting is very quickly you get that segment of the fan base that immediately comes back at you to essentially say, like, what are you all complaining about? This was Jim Harbaugh so much better than Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke and winning 10 games 3 out of the last 4 years. What else do you want? Like, there's this immediate, and we see it all the time, right? And it's not quite the extent of what the comparison I'm going to make, but we've talked about how when things happen at programs like Michigan State, like Penn State, Ohio State, the circle the wagon, we're all Spartans, and the movie 300, I think, is a reference where it's like, okay, we dig in and we're going to defend this program to the max. And so some people feel like when a loss takes place and people are frustrated, that what they need to do is they need to be Jim Harbaugh's champion. They need to come to his defense and hold the spear up and hold the shield up and talk about anybody that doesn't think that this program is perfect right now is not a true fan. And so you've seen a lot of that immediate aftermath, but then you've seen this huge blowback by a lot of Michigan fans that are just, you can't say anything negative now. It's already been 24 hours. After 24 hours, you can't say anything negative about Michigan anymore. You can't be critical, because why would you be critical of a program that won 10 games for the third time in the last 4 years? So, yeah, there's that on both sides right now, Steve.
The former... We live in a ready, fire, aim society. I've succumbed to it at times, and when you have social media tools at your disposal like Twitter and at all, it's difficult to avoid. Not excusing it, but it's more of an empathetic understanding because of the nature of human nature. The second faction that you talked about, I've always struggled with, because do you think in their film study on Monday, watching Zach Gentry again show that and I'm sorry, he's just soft. He needs to get tougher. It's what we would say about a player on any other team. Watching him again fail to make catches that he should make when he's got as physically dominant of a frame as he does. Do you think Jim Harbaugh and the film study there, his position coach in the tight end room, you think they looked at him and said, well, we won 10 games this year, Zach, and we know you're trying your best. And of course they didn't say that, Mike. They looked right at him and said, catch the effing ball. I've always found it fascinating when that group of fans believes that, I run into this in my day job, like we have to be nicer than God. There's a group of fans who believe they've got to be nicer than the coach. Right. I'm sure the tight end coach at Michigan has nothing negative at all to say to Zach Gentry about dropping a pass in the end zone for the second damn week in a row. I'm sure he's perfectly fine with it because they've won 10 games 3 of the last 4 years. Michael, you've covered teams, as have I. We both know that's not how this works at all. He's hearing it right now.
Oh, he's hearing it without a doubt. And, it's funny to me because is there any chance whatsoever that Don Brown, after that game, didn't walk into the locker room, throw something, yell, say, what the bleep happened? How did this happen? He probably was so pissed off. And yet somehow if we criticize Don Brown, then who are we to dare criticize Don Brown because he has the number 1 ranked defense in college football this year? Yeah, I don't get it. And it's so funny to me because, the idea coming into the game, we talked about it, Steve, when Michigan ended up settling for 6 field goals and went 1 for 8 in the red zone. And this idea that, Michigan's saving stuff because they don't want to give Ohio State any type of ammunition, stuff that they need to be able to beat Michigan. Well, A, how did that work out for them? And B, are people really that stupid? Like, this is what I keep coming back to. Are people this dumb that they think, that they truly believe that after 11 weeks of football, that Ohio State doesn't have enough film to watch of Michigan after 11 weeks to figure out what Michigan does well, what Michigan does not do well, that Michigan, in the 11th week of the season against Indiana, is holding something back in the red zone so as not to give Urban Meyer any type of film study? Are people that dumb, Steve? I think that they are. Like, that's what blows my mind. is these consistent narratives and tropes that just keep getting repeated and repeated and repeated. I mean, Michigan's pass rush was not existent on Saturday. That must mean, according to the fans, that Rashawn Gary was triple teamed and they ran away from Chase Winovich the whole time, and they double teamed Carlo Kemp, and they did this and did that. You know what? As you said with Zach Gentry, sometimes the guys just don't get the job done.
Yeah.
Sometimes they go out there and they lay an egg. Sometimes they go out there and they're not good enough. They're not as good as the team opposite them. The coaches are not good enough. The players are not good enough. And that's what happened on Saturday. We don't need to make excuses for it. Michigan flat out sucked in every facet on Saturday, especially at the top with coaching. They sucked on offense. Okay, they had 19 points after the third quarter. People will bandy about this whole, they scored 39 points in the game, so what do you expect? BS. If I could swear, can I swear on your podcast?
That's up to you. I'd prefer you not, but I think most people would be sympathetic if you did.
Then we know what BS is. We know what BS is. I was just going to say it all the way out. But BS, okay? They didn't score 39 points in that game. They scored 14 of those points with backup quarterbacks, their third and fourth string quarterbacks, in the game at the end when Ohio State, it was garbage time. You know, so the offense failed. The defense was an abomination. The numbers, 62 points allowed, the most in a game besides the 65 that a Rich Rodriguez defense allowed in triple overtime to Illinois. The special teams failed. Everything failed on Saturday. And I don't know why people can't actually look at that and say, okay, look, we screwed up in every way conceivable. When our measuring stick, our barometer is a Big Ten title and beating Ohio State, we didn't come close in year 4. We got our butts handed to us. We were closer in year 2. We were closer in year 3. In year 4, we got manhandled. And I don't know why people can't look at that objectively with honest eyes and with critical eyes and ask how it happened and why is it not going to happen going forward, instead of just giving me this, everything's going great, everything's hunky-dory, they won 10 games for the third time in the last 4 years. Just shut up.
You know, I think you and I, maybe we have different reasons why. I mean, I don't know really what your rationale is. For me, I'm a capitalist, so I'm totally fine with players protecting the asset, which is their person, in advance of the NFL draft. I have no problem with them sitting out whatsoever. And Rashawn Gary announced yesterday he's going to go pro, and I think it's highly likely, therefore, that means if he's announcing right after the season that he's essentially ending his time as a full-time member of the Michigan football program and won't play in the bowl. And there may be others that do the same. What I don't understand, though, is, and because I heard this from some of the Michigan media today, on one hand, you want me to believe that this is a successful season because they're going to get to a major bowl. On the other hand, you're going to tell me, though, that it's a meaningless bowl, so it's okay if all these guys sit out. How can both of those things be true? Is it a meaningless bowl or not? You know, like I have no problem with a player putting his own self-interest at this stage of his career when he's given so much to the university. I'm not arguing with that. I bring this up because it's in the context of what you were just discussing, the moving target aspect. Okay, I mean, so if it's a meaningless bowl game, then, why should I consider the season of success for getting to something you say is meaningless? So let's just have all these guys sit out. It can't be meaningless. And then also the goal of getting there makes it successful. Jim Harbaugh doesn't need to be babysat. He came within 6 inches of a Super Bowl title. Okay. You're not going to be more he just fired 4 coaches in the offseason. Okay. We don't need to wet nurse Jimmy. I think he's got this. So where do we come up with all these, self-refuting narratives all the time? I don't understand it.
I think honestly, and you know this as well as I do, Steve. I think people try to make sense of it, and they can't possibly accept what has transpired, and so there has to be an excuse for it. Mm-hmm. There has to be some type of, well, this is okay. We failed to beat Ohio State. We failed to reach the Big Ten title game. We failed to go to the College Football Playoff. But hey, we get to go to the Rose Bowl, so everything is terrific. Everything's fine. Needless to say that when Michigan's team bus pulls up to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, that they're going to be backing into that parking spot. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's just the way that it is in life, Steve. I mean, you know this. I mean, we're always trying to make lemonade out of lemons. Well, sometimes it's just lemons.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's what it is. And to a different degree, and what you're kind of talking about, is it this way or is it that way? Is I want to ask a question about recruiting, because one of the consistent narratives that has emerged in the last couple of days is that Michigan didn't lose that game because they were outcoached. They lost the game because, frankly, they're just not as talented
that's garbage.
as Ohio State.
That's garbage.
They don't have as many 4- and 5-star recruits as Ohio State. So then let me ask you this question, because in that same person tells me they're not as talented as Ohio State. Well, Michigan will pick up, and right now I think Michigan has more than half of its class in this 2019 class is 3-star or less. And so Michigan will pick those up, and they'll say, well, you have to trust the coaches. The coaches will coach them up. But
yes.
Which one is it?
Which one is it? Choose one. Right.
Coach up, or do they need to be 4- and 5-star talents? Because if you can coach them up, well, then the game on Saturday you have no excuse for. And if it's all about talent, then don't tell me to trust the coaches when they go off there and offer a 2- or 3-star kid and they take that commitment as opposed to putting in a little bit extra work and getting that 4- or 5-star. Now, it's not that simple, but which one is it? Which one is it?
Hey, recruiting rankings matter. I agree. But when you're recruiting at the level, meaning the recruiting gap between Ohio State and, say, Michigan State matters a lot more than the recruiting gap between Michigan and Ohio State. Or I'm sorry, because in one case you're talking about a top 2 or 3 recruiting program, and the other perennially, and in the other case you're talking about a top 8 to 15 perennial recruiting program. That's not nearly the gap when you're perennially outside the top 25. And if you think there's a massive talent gap between these two, is Ohio State more talented? Yes. Is there a massive talent gap? No. And here's how I'll prove it to you. Watch the next 2 damn NFL drafts, because nobody's better at evaluating talent than the guys who are part of the trillion-dollar industry known as the NFL, whose job it is to get those things right. And you're going to see Michigan's defense look like the next 2 NFL drafts was essentially a farm team, a AAA franchise for the NFL. I'll bet you all 11 guys that started on Saturday, all 11. And then guys like Kwity Paye and Josh Uche that play significant minutes. I bet you'll see all of those guys in NFL training camps either this coming July or July of 2020. Mark my words. There wasn't a massive talent gap there.
Can I give you another one about that talent gap disparity, the whole thing? Because the other one that I've heard the last couple of days is that, well, Jimmy needs to get his guys in there, right? He needs to have more of his recruits that are playing this game. That's why there's still this huge difference. Well, 74 out of the 81 scholarship players on Michigan's team right now are Jim Harbaugh recruits. 20 of the 22 starters that were in that game against Ohio State on Saturday are Jim Harbaugh recruits. And out of that 20, 15 of those guys were either in their 3rd or 4th year. They weren't freshmen. They weren't sophomores. They were guys that were in their 36th game or their 48th game against Ohio State. So which one is it? Is it that you need to get, if you need to get your guys, I mean, those are his guys. Those are his guys. And if you need to have veterans, well, most of the guys playing in that game on Saturday were either junior or senior class. So which one? And these are the type of narratives, Steve, that you and I hear over and over and over again this week. And you're right. Jim Harbaugh, I guarantee you, you and I right now, we're being critical. We're being harsh. We're being hard on Jim Harbaugh. Do you think there's anything that you and I can say on this podcast that Jim Harbaugh does not walk into Schembechler Hall and say to his coaches or look in the mirror and say to himself?
And if that's not true, we got the wrong damn coach. Okay? Here's the thing. And this is why when I started out my monologue at the top of the episode, I wanted to make sure we noted the progress the program has made. And I know you'll agree with me on this because we've talked about it. Right now, we're averaging 9.5 wins a year under Jim. We barely averaged 7 wins a year the decade before he got here. We are greatly appreciative of it. We're fans, okay? The question then comes, what is standing between where we're at right now and where we ultimately want to go? And that's the conversation we're having right now. And here's the number one issue. The number one issue is Ohio State decided, you know what? our offensive line hasn't run blocked all year. We're not going to sit here every time we take the ball out of Dwayne Haskins' hands. It's a win for Michigan. So we're not going to commit to J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber running 25 times. We're not going to do that. And then on defense, they decided, you know what? Our linebackers and DBs can't play in space and have been terrible at assignment football and flowing to the ball all year. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to play man-to-man, and we're bringing with our corners, and we're bringing the linebackers downhill to fill a gap. And if Michigan goes on the perimeter, and if Michigan throws the ball downfield and beats us, we'll dare them to do that. But we're not going to get caught with our knickers down like we have all year long. And here's what Michigan, so Ohio State's coaches said, 11 games, here are the clear weaknesses of our team. And so we're going to construct a game plan to mitigate and hide those weaknesses and accentuate our strengths as much as we can. Here's what the Michigan coaches did. They ran the same damn game plan that worked against Michigan State in a slogging rain with a quarterback with one arm. They ran the same game plan that they ran against Wisconsin, whose coach panicked and said, let me stop giving it to my 2,000-yard tailback. And they decided we're never going to, where they did attack their perimeter on a few plays. That's when Higdon had his biggest runs, by the way, but they rarely attacked the perimeter. They've got these three guys at receiver in uniform who look like an NFL team. They rarely threw the ball down the field to them. When they did, they threw the ball down the field to Nico Collins twice. They got 2 touchdowns because he was physically better than the Ohio State corner that was covering him. We're down 21. We're running play action 7-step drops with the quarterback's back to a 9-man rush, who then turns around and there's 3 guys in his face. He doesn't have time to go to his first read, let alone a 3 progression read, play action level pass. What in the Sam hell was that? And then Don Brown's out there saying, you know what? Let's go ahead and give Dwayne Haskins the entire field to throw to, and take our chances with that. They made no adjustments at all. Still at halftime, that was a 5-point game, and I started to wonder if this was like 96, where they dominated the first half, and then we hung around, and then there was the one play where Sean Springs slipped, Ty Streets took it to the house, and we owned the game after that. And so I didn't think we were going to win at the start of the game. I texted you, I don't like the aura, the atmosphere doesn't feel right. I thought we were going to win at the half when we were down by only 5. Here's what happens. We go down, we force a punt. Next possession, run up the middle, nothing, sack, interception. We did nothing at all to put our players in the best possible position to succeed, but we did put Ohio State's players in the best possible position to, so we had 2 coaching staffs on the field Saturday, each putting the guys in the scarlet uniforms in the best possible position to succeed. And that's why that was a 25-point game, Michael. That's my view of it anyway.
No, I mean, I think you're dead on. You know what? If you go back, remember the 2012 game down in Columbus, and Devin Gardner and Denard Robinson. Denard was banged up in that Nebraska game, and Devin took over, and I think he started like 4 or 5 games in a row. And then Denard was coming back, and there was all this concern that Denard couldn't throw the football, right? And as we found out in that game, he couldn't throw the football. All he could do was carry it. Well, at the end of the first half, Michigan's kind of not playing very well, and they put Denard under center and are in shotgun, and they run read option, and he runs for like a 52-yard touchdown or something like that. And Harbaugh just went at halftime and said, you know what? That one play that worked against Ohio State in this whole first half, we just got to run that all over again in the whole second half, and we'll beat them. And what he came out with in the third quarter, and Devin Gardner likes to give me a hard time about this as our Monday morning quarterback. He loves to see how animated I get out of it, because he literally would alternate them back and forth. And every time he'd take Devin out, he'd put Denard in and run Denard up the middle, and they kept on getting stopped and stopped and stopped and stopped and stopped. And so you had this one play that happened at the end of the first half that completely gave Al Borges this vote of confidence that he shouldn't have had. And I think what happened in that Michigan-Ohio State game this past Saturday is you had the end of the half. You had the gift touchdown, the special teams gaffe, and Michigan, makes it 21-19. Should have been 21-20. I hate chasing points in the first half.
So do I.
But when that happened, even when Ohio State drove the length of the field, the coaches went into the locker room and said, you know what? We're only down by 5 right now. Yeah, the defense hasn't played very well. But if we just come out here with the same game plan that we had in the first quarter, we're going to win this football game. Mm-hmm. And they came out with the same game plan, the third that they had in the first, and they got 0 points. They got 0 points. They gave up 17. Now, in all fairness, 7 of them came off of a special teams punt block, but they got 0 points in that third quarter. And when they woke up and the coaching staff was like, this ain't working. We got to do something else. The score was 41-19, and the game was over with.
Michael Spath from Wolverine Digest, WTKA in Ann Arbor. I think it was one of Scott Bell on Twitter, who's an absolute must follow for Michigan fans, put it this way. This is a lot more fun when you're winning 10 in a row than after you lose to your biggest rival again. Indeed. The last 10 weeks of these interviews have been much more fun than this one was, but it was necessary, and it's good to talk to you, brother. We'll do it again next week. Take care.
Yeah, I kind of lost my cool a little bit there. It's just 2 days of listening, 2 days of social media, and hearing all the same excuses, Mm-hmm. But you know what? Hopefully better days are ahead. I really hope that, Steve. I really want this team to be a success, but I'm a realist, and I don't see the ceiling being punctured anytime soon.
Not under the current approach. Under the current approach, you're going to be a 9 or 10 win, New Year's 6 kind of a program, but you are not going to consistently beat or even compete with Urban Meyer with this style of ball. No doubt about it. Won't work. Appreciate it, man. Good to talk to you.
All right. Thank you.
If you want to keep up with what we think about the Wolverines all week long, aside from when we're doing this for Michigan Podcast, check us out at WolverineDigest.com or Wolverine Maven, part of the Maven Network, WolverineDigest.com. Myself and Michael Spath from WTKA in Ann Arbor, we keep you up to date with our commentary all week long. And one of the really cool things I love about how this site works is that the sidebar there where we can give you, almost like a Mike Florio does at Pro Football Talk, where he can give you little mini updates via Twitter and other interactions, things that you probably want to know, be aware of, but don't require 500 to 700 word columns. I love that part of our website. It's a really easy, functional website to follow, WolverineDigest.com. And now this week's Twitter poll results we asked you, was this a successful season for Michigan football? I was a little surprised at these results. Only 31% of you said yes. I thought the percentage would be higher. 38% said no. 31% says it depends on a bowl win. Now, here's why we asked this question. Next week, I'm going to lay out a metric, a framework for determining what is or isn't a successful season for football and men's basketball. And that's going to be a main theme on next week's episode of Michigan Podcast. So make sure you stick around for that. Next up, this week's question of the week from Andre the Great. Is it time to run a more conventional defense given what we saw against Ohio State? No. Well, Steve, you just said that, you thought Don Brown's defense was unrealistic. I don't think we need a new defense because it has worked. It dominates teams that we are more talented than. It dominates them to the point that they're not permitted to hang around and ghost us at the end because we've overwhelmed them. But it's not a realistic defense to play, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? Transcendently, regardless of situation. We don't need a more conventional defense. We need a more multiple defense. Let me say that again. We don't need a more conventional defense. We need a more multiple defense. Here's what we do on offense and defense, really, is when we can bully you, we're great. When you punch us back, we're like, oh. And you saw that on Saturday. You saw it against Penn State last year. You saw it against Notre Dame this year. Brandon Winbush, who's benched, by the way, has been benched for 2 months. He had his career high QBR against us. You have seen this repeatedly when the defense has been unable to hold slim fourth quarter leads, like against Ohio State last year, like against Indiana last year. We had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and we had to win that game in overtime. So again, when you're able to punch back, Don Brown is great at bullying, and that's going to work on a lot of teams in college football. But ultimately, to be the program we want to be a football playoff program, to be the Big Ten champion program, we're going to have to be able to beat Ohio State and Penn State in the same year. The odds that both of those teams aren't going to have great quarterbacks. They may not both have great quarterbacks. They did this year, but Trace McSorley was banged up a lot of the year. All right, so the odds that they both won't have great quarterbacks is much, much lower than the odds they both will have great quarterbacks in a given year. Most of the time, one of them certainly will. So at some point, to get to the Big Ten championship game, we got to beat both those teams. And at least one of them pretty much every year is going to have a great quarterback. And sometimes they both will. Never, they both won't. And we don't beat great quarterbacks. And people want to send me, had a guy who's a huge fan of what we do, and I appreciate it. His name's Chris Nielsen. So if you're watching, Chris, shout out to you. Sent me a metric of how we hold teams, even good ones, beneath their season averages. That doesn't tell me anything. Because when good plays good, by nature, you typically hold each other below your season averages because you're playing better competition than Rutgers. So that doesn't tell me much. I need to know what you're doing situationally. And what's beginning to happen when Don Brown's defense is, teams are starting to figure it out, meaning the teams that can physically match up with us. And this reminds me of when Jim Herman was at Michigan. When Jim Herman came to Michigan, we were running this conventional bend but don't break defense with Greg Madison, and we were getting beat. And Greg Madison went to Notre Dame. Jim Herman got promoted from linebackers coach. And as a linebacker guy, Jim Herman watched what was the top defense in the NFL at the time. And it was the Steelers and what they were doing with Greg Lloyd and Kevin Green and their linebackers. It was called Blitzburg. And they had essentially Bill Cowher and Dom Capers had created this new defensive gimmick called the zone blitz. And it was to answer the West Coast offense, which was killing teams with throws to the running backs and slant routes that Jerry Rice was then taking 8-yard passes and Tim Brown and taking them to the house. And so what they did was, and the reason they were doing that is these routes were beating man coverage. You'd blitz, your corner couldn't get to the crossing route or the slant route quick enough. Does this sound familiar, Michigan fan? So your corner couldn't cut off the slant or the crossing route quick enough. You hit that guy in stride on a hot read, and now if he gets leverage on the defense, he can house you. So to countermand this, the Steelers came up with the zone blitz. And they would show what looked like blitzes, and they were. But what would happen is the defensive tackle would then step back into the passing lane to cut off that hot read, which didn't give quarterbacks a chance to quickly get rid of the ball against the blitzing linebacker and made them more vulnerable. And for about 3 or 4 years, this destroyed teams in the NFL. Jim Herman saw this and brought it to Michigan. Michigan rode it all the way to a national championship in 1997. But by the time we got to 2003 and 4, we had to run Jim Herman out of here because teams had figured out the zone blitz. And now all of a sudden he had no counter. That's why he's been a linebacker position coach in the NFL for the last 10 years. So I'm wondering if Buddy Ryan, same thing back in the day with the Bears. Teams eventually figured out the 46 defense. Don Brown has a gimmick. And the gimmick is, I'm going to violate the norms of football by every down, I'm going to bring more guys than you can block. And for most college teams, this is going to overwhelm them. They're lucky if they've got one precise route runner at receiver, let alone 3 or 4 explosive, quick twitch guys. And that's why when we play lesser teams, we dominate them. And we put them so far in a hole offensively, they can't hang around with us, even if we're having a slow day or an off day or a flat game, because they just don't win enough at the line of scrimmage to take advantage of it. But when we play teams that can hit us back, that can hold their water at the point of attack for an extra second, in terms of pass pro. And they have receivers that can get off the line quick. And they have a quarterback who's got an NFL release. As they said that one time Carl Lewis tried to sing the national anthem, that's what happens. And we have seen this now several times. He needs to adjust. So I don't think we need to play a more conventional defense. I think we need to play a more multiple one. One that is more flexible, one that says, okay, all right, you match up with our scheme, we're going to come at you with this. Well, Steve, that's tough to do. Well, that's why they get paid the big bucks. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Want to thank those of you that follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. Keep up to date with us there. You can also read our analysis and stuff at WolverineDigest.com every day. Thanks to our friends at Detroit Sports Podcast, which help to spread the word about what we do here. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Please give us a like. Those help us, by the way, and give us a subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play, as well as a 5-star review. Thank you to all of you that have done all of those things. Until next week, better days are ahead, I hope. Go Blue.